In the vast tapestry of Roman history, where emperors often loom as figures of unyielding power, military might, and sometimes unchecked decadence, there emerges a singular, almost paradoxical silhouette: Marcus Aurelius. He was a man who inherited the most powerful position in the known world, a vast empire stretching from Britain to the deserts of Mesopotamia, and yet he chose to spend his nights, in the dim glow of an oil lamp, wrestling not with senatorial decrees or military strategies, but with the profound questions of human existence, duty, and virtue. He was truly the emperor-philosopher, a living embodiment, or at least a strenuous aspirant, to Plato's ancient ideal. Our journey into the life of Marcus Aurelius is not merely a historical account. It is an exploration of a soul under immense pressure, a mind seeking clarity amidst chaos, and a will striving for virtue against the backdrop of unparalleled power. It is in understanding his tumultuous times that we can truly grasp the profound significance of his personal reflections, known to us today as the Meditations. Marcus Aurelius was born Marcus Annius Verus on April 26, 121 AD, into an influential and wealthy senatorial family in Rome. From an early age he was marked by destiny, though perhaps not in the way one might initially imagine. His father died when he was young, and he was raised by his paternal grandfather and, crucially, by his mother, Domitia Lucilla. But it was not just lineage that set him apart. It was the meticulous and rigorous education he received, an education that laid the very foundations for the philosophical emperor he would become. Roman aristocrats typically received a robust education in rhetoric, law, and history, preparing them for public service. Marcus received all this and more. He was tutored by some of the most esteemed scholars of the age in Greek and Latin, in rhetoric, geometry, and music. He excelled, showing a remarkably serious and studious disposition, earning the affectionate nickname Verisimus, the most truthful, from his adoptive great-uncle, the Emperor Hadrian. This early life was shaped dramatically by one pivotal event: his adoption by Antoninus Pius in 138 AD, upon the command of Hadrian, who was then nearing the end of his life. Hadrian had chosen Antoninus Pius as his successor, but with a condition. Antoninus, in turn, was to adopt two young men, Lucius Verus and Marcus Annius Verus. Marcus was just 17. This act thrust him directly into the line of succession, transforming him overnight from a promising young aristocrat into Caesar, the heir apparent to the Roman Empire. The implications of this adoption were profound, not least for his education. His philosophical studies intensified, guided by a coterie of tutors, but one figure stands out: Quintus Junius Rusticus. Rusticus, a prominent Stoic philosopher and a man of great integrity, became more than just a teacher. He became a mentor, a guide, and a catalyst for Marcus's deep dive into Stoicism. And it was Rusticus who introduced Marcus to the writings of Epictetus. Imagine, for a moment, the young Marcus, a prince of Rome, destined for the imperial purple, sitting quietly as Rusticus presents him with a set of scrolls. These were not the flowery rhetoric of the sophists, nor the intricate metaphysics of Plato's Academy, but the raw, unvarnished wisdom of a former slave, a man who had endured physical suffering and exile, yet found an unshakable inner freedom through Stoic philosophy. Epictetus's discourses, as transcribed by his student Arrian, presented a philosophy rooted in practical application, in distinguishing between what is within our control and what is not, and in cultivating a fortress of inner resilience. Marcus later reflected on Rusticus's influence in the very first book of his Meditations, a book where he meticulously lists the lessons learned from various family members and teachers. Of Rusticus he writes, "From Rusticus I received the impression that my character needed improvement and discipline, and from him I learned not to be led astray into the passion of writing treatises on speculative subjects, nor delivering declamations of moral exhortation, nor presenting an exaggerated image of a man practicing asceticism for the sake of show. From him, too, I learned to write letters without affectation, and to be readily reconciled to those who have offended me as soon as they are disposed to come back. But most importantly," he noted, and for giving me his own copy of Epictetus's discourses, "this wasn't merely a book. It was a revelation. It offered a framework for living, a moral compass for navigating the inevitable storms of life, a philosophy that spoke directly to the heart of what it meant to be a human being, and especially what it meant to be a just and rational ruler." The path to emperorship was long and arduous. Marcus served diligently under Antoninus Pius for 23 years, learning the intricate machinery of imperial administration, witnessing firsthand the immense burdens of governing an empire. This was a period of relative peace and stability, often referred to as the Pax Romana, but it was also a time of preparation, of honing his understanding of justice, duty, and effective governance, all through the lens of Stoic principles. Then in 161 AD, Antoninus Pius died and Marcus Aurelius ascended to the imperial throne, but he did so under an unprecedented condition. He insisted that his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, be made co-emperor, sharing equal powers. This act, born perhaps from a Stoic sense of fairness and a recognition of shared duty, was highly unusual for Rome, a stark contrast to the often bloody and ruthless succession battles that marked much of its history. It spoke volumes about Marcus's character, his humility, his commitment to justice, and his willingness to delegate and collaborate, even with someone whose temperament was markedly different from his own. The serene peace that had characterized the reign of Antoninus Pius quickly shattered. Marcus Aurelius's tenure as emperor was, in stark contrast, one of almost incessant crisis. He inherited not a golden age, but an age of iron, of plague, and of perpetual war. Foremost among these challenges were the Marcomannic Wars. For nearly 14 years, from 166 AD until his death in 180 AD, Marcus was largely absent from Rome, leading legions on the northern frontiers. The Germanic tribes, the Marcomanni, Quadi, Sarmatians, and others, had coalesced into a formidable threat, pushing across the Danube frontier, even penetrating deep into Roman Italy. These were existential threats to the empire, demanding Marcus's direct, unwavering attention. Imagine the emperor, not in the opulent palaces of Rome, but living in military camps on the bleak, windswept plains along the Danube. He was surrounded by the harsh realities of war, the constant threat of barbarian incursions, the logistical nightmares of supplying vast armies, the chilling reports of casualties, the daily grind of military command. This was not a setting conducive to philosophical contemplation, at least not in the traditional sense of quiet solitude. And yet, it was precisely in this crucible of war that Marcus Aurelius penned the reflections we now know as Meditations. This context is crucial for understanding the nature of the text. It was not written for publication. It was not a philosophical treatise meant to persuade others. Instead, it was a deeply personal journal, a spiritual exercise, a series of intimate dialogues with himself, a practice of assent, impression, and impulse, as Epictetus taught. He was performing Stoic exercises, reminding himself of Stoic principles, reflecting on his actions, correcting his thoughts, preparing for future challenges, and fortifying his inner citadel against the external chaos. He wrote, for example, begin the morning by saying to yourself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. This wasn't a lament. It was a preparation, a mental rehearsal for the day ahead, for the difficult people and events he knew he would encounter. Concurrent with the wars, and perhaps even more devastating, was the Antonine Plague. It erupted around 165 AD, likely brought back by troops returning from campaigns in the east, and it ravaged the Roman Empire for years, persisting in waves for decades. Modern historians believe it was either smallpox or measles. Its mortality rate was staggering, potentially killing millions, including, some estimates suggest, up to a third of the population in some regions. The plague decimated legions, emptied cities, and crippled the economy. It was a crisis of unprecedented scale, plunging the empire into a profound state of grief and fear. Marcus himself was deeply affected. He witnessed untold suffering, the loss of friends and family, and the constant threat of his own mortality. It was in this atmosphere of widespread death and despair that his Stoic philosophy became not a luxury, but a vital necessity. How does one lead an empire through such devastation? How does one maintain hope, courage, and justice when death stalks every street? His meditations are replete with reflections on the ephemeral nature of life, the inevitability of death, and the importance of living virtuously in the face of our fleeting existence. Do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over you. While you live, while it is in your power, be good. These are not the words of a detached observer, but of a man deeply immersed in the tragedy of his age, desperately clinging to reason and virtue as anchors in a sea of suffering. Beyond war and plague, Marcus also grappled with political intrigues, economic downturns, and the sheer administrative complexity of governing such a vast domain. Yet amidst all these pressures, his Stoic principles were not merely theoretical. They guided his practical actions as emperor. He implemented legal reforms aimed at protecting orphans and minors, showing a deep concern for the most vulnerable in society. He worked to alleviate the suffering caused by the plague, distributing resources and providing aid. He demonstrated extraordinary financial restraint, even selling imperial valuables to fund the war effort rather than excessively taxing the populace. This commitment to justice, compassion, and fiscal responsibility were direct applications of his philosophical beliefs, the Stoic virtues of justice, temperance, and practical wisdom. Here we must pause and consider the ancient ideal that Marcus Aurelius arguably came closest to embodying. Plato's philosopher-king. In his seminal work, The Republic, Plato famously argued that cities would never find peace until philosophers become kings, or those now called kings and rulers genuinely and adequately study philosophy. For Plato, the ideal ruler was not a populist demagogue or a ruthless tyrant, but one who possessed wisdom, understanding the form of the good, and who could therefore rule justly and rationally for the benefit of all citizens. Marcus, educated in Greek philosophy from a young age, would have been intimately familiar with Plato's ideas. He wasn't born a philosopher, then suddenly thrust into kingship. Rather, his philosophical development was intertwined with his destiny as a ruler. He viewed his emperorship not as a right to indulge in power, but as a profound duty, a responsibility to serve the Roman people and the cosmos, fulfilling his role within the grand Stoic order of the universe. He constantly reminded himself in meditations to act with justice, self-control, and reason, precisely the qualities Plato envisioned for his ideal guardians. He wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your own judgment about it, and it is in your power to wipe out this judgment now." This was not just personal advice. It was an emperor steeling himself to make difficult decisions, to endure criticism, and to maintain an unclouded mind in the face of imperial pressures. But was his stoicism a luxury afforded by his position, or an absolute necessity? This is a crucial counterargument. One might argue that only an emperor with access to the best tutors, leisure time, even amidst war, moments of personal reflection exist, and immense resources, could truly dedicate himself to such a rigorous philosophical path. Most common people struggling for daily survival could hardly afford the time or mental energy for profound Stoic contemplation. However, the counter-response, and indeed Marcus's own life, suggests it was far more a necessity than a luxury. The sheer weight of governing an empire under siege by war and plague would crush an ordinary individual. Without a robust philosophical framework, a system for managing emotions, making rational decisions, and finding meaning in suffering, the burden would have been intolerable. His stoicism was his operating system, his psychological armor. It allowed him to remain steadfast, to endure prolonged hardship, to make difficult, often unpopular decisions, and to maintain his integrity when all around him threatened to crumble. It provided a coherent worldview that made sense of an often senseless world. He wasn't reflecting on abstract theories for intellectual amusement. He was actively practicing his philosophy to survive, to lead, and to be truly human. His simple lifestyle, even as emperor, opting for plain fare and simple clothes, sleeping on a hard pallet, was not an affectation, but a continuous Stoic exercise in self-discipline and detachment from external comforts, further demonstrating that his philosophy was deeply integrated into his daily existence. Accounts describe him wearing a philosopher's cloak even in the imperial palace, a subtle but significant statement in a world obsessed with pomp and ceremony. Another counterargument, one that often plagues Stoicism, is the perceived coldness or emotional detachment it can foster. Critics might ask, in the face of immense suffering, like the Antonine Plague, did Stoicism lead Marcus to neglect emotional empathy in favor of rational acceptance? Did his focus on inner tranquility make him less responsive to the external cries of his people? This is a complex charge. Stoicism does advocate for a certain emotional detachment, not in the sense of becoming emotionless, but in not allowing destructive passions, like excessive fear, grief, or anger, to overwhelm reason. Marcus certainly practiced this. He speaks of confronting death with equanimity, of accepting what cannot be changed. However, his administrative and legal reforms, his efforts during the plague, and his general reputation for mildness and justice suggest that his stoicism did not lead to callousness. Instead, it seems to have channeled his concern into effective, rational action. He wasn't crying with every suffering citizen, perhaps, but he was working tirelessly to mitigate that suffering, to ensure justice, and to maintain order. He understood that as emperor, his duty was not to be consumed by emotion, but to act rationally and effectively for the greater good. His philosophy provided the resilience to do this without burning out or succumbing to despair. The calmness wasn't an absence of care, but a presence of unwavering duty. Perhaps the most potent counterargument, one that deeply challenges the success of Marcus as a philosopher-king, lies in the tragedy of his succession. Despite his profound wisdom and commitment to good governance, Marcus Aurelius made the fateful decision to name his biological son, Commodus, as his successor. This broke with the tradition of the 5 good emperors, where rulers chose the most capable successor, often through adoption, rather than simply passing power to their kin. Commodus proved to be one of Rome's most disastrous emperors, a tyrannical, dissolute, and brutal ruler whose reign plunged the empire into chaos and set the stage for decades of instability. Why did Marcus, a man so devoted to reason and duty, make such a seemingly unstoic choice? Did his focus on inner tranquility lead to a neglect in addressing this critical external problem? The historical record offers no definitive answer, but theories abound. Perhaps he was swayed by paternal affection, a very human failing that even a Stoic philosopher could struggle with. Perhaps he believed that Commodus, despite his flaws, could be guided and trained. Some historians suggest that the pressures of the Marcomannic Wars and his own declining health limited his capacity to find or groom an alternative successor. It's also possible he felt the traditional adoptive succession, while successful, had contributed to some underlying tensions, and a natural succession might provide greater legitimacy and stability, though this proved tragically wrong. This painful episode reminds us that even the greatest philosophers are still human, susceptible to biases and errors in judgment, and that even the most profound philosophy cannot guarantee perfect outcomes in the messy theater of human affairs. It's a stark reminder that even a philosopher-king faces limits to his control, especially over the character of another. Let us now return to the text itself, Meditations. The very title is a misnomer, assigned much later. Marcus himself simply called his writings to myself, Greek, ta eis huton. This perfectly encapsulates its nature. It is a solitary conversation, a series of aphorisms, reminders, reflections, and exhortations, often repetitive, as he hammered home the same principles again and again to his own mind, reinforcing his mental discipline. The style is terse, direct, often lacking the polished literary flourishes of Seneca's more public philosophical essays. It is the raw, unedited thought process of an emperor battling inner demons and external adversaries simultaneously. He used it to prepare for the day ahead, to analyze events that had occurred, to remind himself of the fleeting nature of life, the interconnectedness of all things, and his duty to act justly and rationally. He wrote of the cosmic perspective, urging himself to look to the stars, and as if you were running along with them, consider the changes of the elements. This cosmic viewpoint, a hallmark of Stoicism, allowed him to put his own trials and the empire's troubles into a larger, more manageable perspective. The tradition of philosophical self-help literature was not unique to Marcus Aurelius in ancient Rome. Seneca, a generation before Marcus, also wrote extensively on ethical living, resilience, and happiness, penning letters and essays like On the Shortness of Life and On Tranquility of Mind. However, Seneca's works, while deeply personal in tone, were intended for a wider audience, designed to instruct and persuade. Marcus's Meditations stand apart precisely because they were not for public consumption. They represent a more authentic, unfiltered glimpse into the practical application of philosophy in real time, under the most extreme conditions imaginable. It's like reading someone's personal diary, where they are coaching themselves through life's biggest challenges. Marcus Aurelius's life and philosophy also invite comparisons with other historical leaders who embraced philosophical or spiritual traditions to guide their rule. One prominent example is Ashoka the Great, the Mauryan emperor who ruled much of the Indian subcontinent in the 3rd century BCE. After a brutal war of conquest, Ashoka converted to Buddhism and, like Marcus, sought to govern according to ethical principles. He propagated Buddhist dharma through edicts carved on pillars and rocks, advocating for nonviolence, religious tolerance, and social welfare. While their philosophies differed, Stoicism emphasizing reason and duty, Buddhism compassion and non-attachment, both leaders represent a rare breed. Rulers who genuinely attempted to integrate profound philosophical principles into the exercise of immense political power, demonstrating that leadership can be driven by something more than mere ambition or conquest. Ashoka, too, faced the difficult balance of maintaining an empire while adhering to ethical ideals, and his legacy, like Marcus's, continues to inspire. The enduring appeal of Meditations to this day speaks volumes. In a world increasingly complex and often overwhelming, Marcus Aurelius offers a timeless guide to inner peace, resilience, and purpose. It is a handbook for navigating uncertainty, for finding calm amidst chaos, for distinguishing between what we can control and what we cannot. His philosophy, forged in the fires of war and plague, serves as a powerful reminder that true power lies not in external dominion but in self-mastery, that our primary duty is to act justly and reasonably, regardless of circumstance. That life is fleeting and thus every moment should be lived with virtue, that the greatest battle is often fought not on a battlefield but within the confines of our own minds. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor philosopher, ultimately transcended the limitations of his imperial role to leave us a legacy of profound personal wisdom. His life was a testament to the profound challenge of balancing immense power with an equally profound philosophical commitment. He strove, imperfectly perhaps, but relentlessly, to demonstrate that philosophy is not a mere academic pursuit, but an essential, practical tool for effective leadership, for resilience, and for simply living a good human life. He died in 180 AD, likely from the plague that had so shaped his reign, on campaign at Vindobona, modern-day Vienna. He passed from this world as he had lived much of it on the frontier, immersed in his duty, a philosopher-warrior to the very end. His meditations, these quiet conversations he had with himself, survived him, speaking across millennia to anyone grappling with the universal questions of how to live, how to lead, and how to find peace in a turbulent world. And for that we owe him an enduring debt. Welcome back to our journey through the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius. In our last segment, we set the stage, painting a picture of the man behind the meditations, the emperor-philosopher wrestling with immense power and profound personal suffering. Today, we delve into the very heart of his philosophy, the robust framework that underpinned his resilience and guided his every action. This is where we uncover the core tenets of Stoicism that Marcus not only inherited but deeply embodied. Imagine, if you will, the bustling marketplace of ancient Athens, sometime around 300 BCE. A philosopher named Zeno of Citium began teaching under a painted porch, the Stoic, giving birth to a school of thought that would echo through millennia. This wasn't just abstract theorizing. Stoicism was, from its very inception, a philosophy designed for life, a practical guide to navigate the unpredictable currents of existence with serenity and purpose. It was refined by thinkers like Cleanthes and Chrysippus, who laid much of the groundwork and later illuminated by the Roman Stoics, the playwright Seneca, the former slave Epictetus, and of course our emperor Marcus Aurelius. At its core, Stoicism offers a profound clarity, a way to distinguish what truly matters from what merely agitates us. Let's begin with perhaps the most liberating and transformative concept in all of Stoicism: the dichotomy of control. This idea is so fundamental that Epictetus, whose teachings profoundly influenced Marcus, famously opened his Enchiridion, or handbook, with it. He states quite plainly, some things are up to us and some are not up to us. A simple sentence, yet its implications are enormous. What is up to us? Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our aversions, in short, everything that is an act of our own mind. These are our judgments, our volitions, our internal responses to the world. They are entirely within our domain. When Marcus Aurelius writes in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. He is echoing Epictetus and underscoring this vital distinction. And what is not up to us? Our bodies, our possessions, our reputations, our social standing, external events, and the actions of other people. These are all outside the sphere of our direct control. They are what Epictetus called externals, indifferent to our will, and ultimately not truly ours. We can influence some of them, certainly. We can strive for a healthy body, work hard for possessions, try to earn a good reputation. But the ultimate outcome, the complete certainty of these things, remains beyond our grasp. Our bodies will age, possessions can be lost, reputations can be slandered, and other people will always act according to their own wills, not ours. The transformative power of understanding this dichotomy is immense. Think about it. How much of our daily anxiety, frustration, and suffering stems from trying to control things that are inherently uncontrollable? We fret over the weather, agonize over what someone else thinks of us, despair over illnesses that strike unexpectedly, or rage at political decisions beyond our individual influence. The Stoics argue that this misplaced effort is the root of our disquiet. Imagine a physical ailment, a chronic pain that has taken hold. The pain itself, the ailment, is an external, not entirely within your control. You can seek medical help, certainly, which is a rational action, but the existence of the pain might persist. However, your reaction to that pain, your judgment about it, your despair or acceptance, your impulse to lash out or to endure with patience, that is entirely within your control. You can cultivate an inner fortitude that allows you to face the discomfort without allowing it to shatter your inner peace. Or consider a more mundane example, a traffic jam. The fact that the road is blocked, that you're stuck, is an external event. You cannot magically clear the road. But your emotional response, the rising anger, the frustration, the urge to honk furiously, that is an internal choice. You can choose instead to accept the reality of the situation, perhaps use the time to listen to a podcast, practice mindfulness, or simply rest your mind. The external situation hasn't changed, but your internal experience of it has been fundamentally altered, moving from agitation to, if not pleasure, at least a calm acceptance. This isn't about passivity or indifference to the world, far from it. It's about strategic placement of our mental energy. As Marcus frequently reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. When faced with an external obstacle, our power lies not in moving the obstacle directly, but in how we adapt, how we think, and how we choose to act in light of it. This brings us to a crucial counterargument often leveled against the dichotomy of control. Does it lead to passivity or fatalism, especially regarding social injustice? If we are to accept what is beyond our control, does that mean we should simply accept injustice, oppression, or suffering in the world? Does it make us complicit by not fighting for change? This is a profound misreading of Stoic philosophy. Stoicism does not advocate for inaction. On the contrary, it strongly emphasizes our duty to humanity, to act virtuously in the world. The Stoic perspective on social injustice is nuanced. You cannot control the existence of injustice, nor can you guarantee the outcome of your efforts to combat it. However, you can control your judgment that injustice is wrong, your impulse to speak out against it, your desire to work towards a better world, and your efforts to act justly yourself. The Stoic doesn't say, "I can't control the outcome, so I won't try." The Stoic says, "I will exert my full, rational effort to combat injustice because it is the right thing to do, because it is consistent with my rational nature and my duty to the cosmic community. I will act virtuously, regardless of whether my efforts succeed in changing the external world in the way I desire." The focus shifts from the outcome, which is external, to the action and intention, which are internal and controllable. This is a powerful insight for anyone engaged in activism or social change. So often, burnout occurs when individuals are solely focused on achieving specific external results, and despair sets in when those results are not immediately forthcoming. A Stoic approach encourages sustained effort, resilience, and a deep-seated commitment to moral action, precisely because the virtue lies in the effort itself, not just its external consequences. It allows one to persist even in the face of daunting odds, knowing that their integrity and effort are their own reward. In this regard, we can see fascinating cross-references to Eastern philosophies, particularly Buddhist concepts of attachment and non-attachment. The suffering in both traditions often arises from clinging to external outcomes, desires, or aversions. The craving for things to be other than they are. Detachment in Stoicism isn't indifference, but a freedom from being disturbed by things outside one's control, allowing one to engage with the world more effectively and with less personal agitation. It's about being fully present and engaged in the process, rather than fixated on the result. And in the modern world, the legacy of the dichotomy of control is perhaps most clearly seen in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. CBT, a widely used and highly effective psychological treatment, directly draws from Stoic principles. At its core, CBT teaches individuals to identify and challenge irrational thoughts and beliefs that contribute to emotional distress. It helps people understand that it's not external events themselves that upset us, but our interpretation and judgment of those events. This cognitive restructuring, the process of examining and changing one's thought patterns, is a direct descendant of Stoic practices. When a CBT therapist asks you to consider alternative perspectives or to reframe a negative thought, they are essentially guiding you towards a Stoic understanding of your internal power over your judgments. Moving beyond this foundational distinction, Stoicism provides a clear ethical compass in the form of the four cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These aren't arbitrary rules, but rather interlinked skills, character traits, and paths to eudaimonia, which we can translate not merely as happiness, but as human flourishing or living well. For the Stoics, these virtues were the only true good, the only things genuinely beneficial. Everything else, health, wealth, pleasure, were indifferents, neither good nor bad in themselves, but potentially used virtuously or unvirtuously. These virtues have deep roots, tracing back to Plato and Aristotle, but the Stoics reinterpreted them through their own lens of rationality and living according to nature. Let's explore each in turn. First, wisdom phronses. This is not mere book learning or intellectual knowledge, though that can be part of it. Stoic wisdom is practical wisdom, the knowledge of what is truly good, what is bad, and what is indifferent. It's the ability to make sound judgments, to discern what truly matters and what doesn't. For Marcus, this meant understanding the logos, the universal reason that governs the cosmos, and applying that understanding to his daily decisions. It's the capacity to see things as they really are, stripped of emotional overlay or societal prejudice. An example of practical wisdom would be distinguishing between a truly harmful thing, which for Stoics is vice or irrationality itself, and a merely inconvenient thing like poverty, illness, or criticism. A wise person understands that losing wealth is an indifferent event, not inherently bad, and certainly not as bad as acting unjustly or cowardly. It's the wisdom that tells us where to apply the dichotomy of control most effectively. Marcus often reminds himself to look at things as they really are, to strip them of their stories and judgments. That's the essence of wisdom. Next, justice, dichotomy. For the Stoics, justice was paramount, especially for someone in Marcus Aurelius's position. It is the virtue that guides our interactions with others, ensuring fairness, honesty, and benevolence. It's the recognition of our shared humanity and our duty to the larger community. Marcus, as emperor, constantly reflected on this, writing, "That which is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bee." He saw humanity as a single interconnected community, a cosmic city, and understood that our individual flourishing is inextricably linked to the well-being of the whole. Justice for a Stoic isn't just about adhering to laws, but about acting with integrity and fairness in all circumstances. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity in every individual, regardless of their status. Think of Marcus tasked with governing a vast empire. His efforts to reform legal codes, to ensure fair trials, to provide for the poor, or to mitigate the suffering caused by plague and war, all exemplify this commitment to justice. He understood that his power was a trust to be used for the common good. Historically, this Stoic emphasis on justice profoundly influenced Roman legal thought. The concept of jus naturale, or natural law, which held that there were universal rights and duties inherent in human nature, discoverable by reason, was deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy. This was a revolutionary idea, suggesting a moral code that transcended local customs or imperial decrees, providing a foundational argument for universal justice and human dignity that would later influence Western jurisprudence for centuries. Seneca, too, often emphasized humanity and universal brotherhood, arguing for compassion towards slaves and advocating for duties owed to all mankind, not just fellow citizens. Then we have courage, Andrea. This isn't merely physical bravery in battle, though Marcus certainly faced that. Stoic courage is primarily moral courage, the strength to stand firm in one's convictions, to face adversity, pain, fear, and even death with equanimity. It's the courage to live virtuously even when it is difficult, unpopular, or dangerous. It's the resilience to endure hardship and to persevere in the face of obstacles. Marcus, burdened by the immense responsibilities of empire, constant warfare on his borders, and numerous personal tragedies, including the deaths of many of his children and his beloved wife, constantly called upon his courage. He sought not to eliminate fear, but to act rightly despite it, to face each day's challenges with unwavering resolve. He recognized that fear of pain or death was often more tormenting than the reality itself. His courage was the inner strength to confront the impermanence of all things and to embrace his duty without complaint. Consider the historical anecdote of Seneca's death. Ordered by Emperor Nero to commit suicide, Seneca faced his end with extraordinary composure. He calmly dictated his last words, comforted his grieving wife and friends, and even when his veins were cut, enduring a slow, painful demise, he maintained his philosophical stance, lecturing his companions on the brevity of life and the unimportance of death. This was not a morbid fascination with death, but the ultimate demonstration of Stoic courage, accepting what is beyond control, death, while maintaining control over one's internal state and one's final, virtuous actions. Another example is Cato the Younger, who famously defied Caesar, choosing suicide over submission, embodying a fierce, uncompromising moral courage in the face of tyranny, a figure deeply admired by later Stoics including Seneca. Finally, temperance, sophrosyne. This virtue encompasses self-control, moderation, and discipline. It's about having mastery over one's desires, impulses, and appetites rather than being enslaved by them. It's not about denying pleasure entirely, but about not letting pleasure or pain dictate one's actions or disturb one's inner peace. A temperate person lives simply, avoids excess, and practices moderation in all things. Marcus, despite being the most powerful man in the world, lived a remarkably temperate life. He shunned luxury, ate and drank moderately, and dressed plainly. He understood that true freedom came not from having everything one desires, but from desiring little. He writes about the importance of being able to abstain, to say no to temptations, and to maintain an even keel regardless of external circumstances. This is the inner discipline that allows one to remain unperturbed by fleeting sensations. An example of temperance might be found in how one approaches material desires. Instead of constantly chasing the latest trends or accumulating possessions, a temperate individual finds contentment in what is sufficient, recognizing that true value lies elsewhere. Or in the face of delicious food, temperance isn't about denying oneself, but enjoying it mindfully without gluttony and knowing when to stop. It's about rational control, not ascetic self-deprivation. It's useful here to draw a cross-reference to Epicureanism, a contemporary philosophy that often gets confused with Stoicism, though it held a contrasting view. Epicureans also sought tranquility, but they largely defined the good life as the pursuit of pleasure, specifically, the absence of pain and mental disturbance, ataraxia, and bodily pain, aponia. While some Epicureans also advocated a simple, moderate life to avoid the pains of excess and unfulfilled desires, their ultimate goal was pleasure as the highest good. For the Stoics, virtue itself was the only good, and pleasure was an indifferent, a mere byproduct of virtuous action, not the aim. This distinction is crucial. The Stoic practices temperance because it is rational and virtuous, not primarily for the pleasure or lack of pain it brings. Crucially, these four cardinal virtues are not isolated principles. They are interconnected. You cannot be truly courageous without the wisdom to know what is worth fighting for. You cannot be truly just without the temperance to overcome selfish desires. Wisdom guides all the other virtues, ensuring they are applied correctly. Courage provides the strength to enact what wisdom dictates, even when it's difficult. Justice directs our virtuous actions outwards towards the community, while temperance ensures our internal discipline and self-mastery. They are, in essence, different facets of a single, coherent ethical framework, all leading to eudaimonia. Finally, we arrive at the overarching principle that binds all these tenets together, living according to nature. This phrase, so central to Stoicism, can be deeply misunderstood if we don't grasp what nature meant to the Stoics. They certainly didn't mean living like animals, following raw instinct. For them, nature referred to the universal, rational order of the cosmos, often called the logos. The concept of logos itself has ancient roots, notably in the pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus, who spoke of a universal reason or law governing all things, a constant flux and order underlying reality. The Stoics adopted and expanded this concept. For them, the universe is not chaotic but orderly, rational, and deterministic. Everything that happens is part of a grand design, an unfolding of cosmic reason. There is a divine spark, a rational principle, inherent in all things, especially in human beings. Our place within this cosmic order is unique. Unlike other creatures, we possess reason, a faculty that mirrors the universal logos. To live according to nature, therefore, means to live according to our rational nature. It means exercising our highest human faculty, aligning our individual reason with the universal reason. It means understanding the cosmic order, accepting its inevitabilities, and playing our role within it virtuously. This leads to several key arguments. 1. The rational order of the universe dictates human behavior and provides meaning. By understanding that everything happens according to a rational plan, even seemingly negative events, we can find meaning and purpose in our existence. We are not adrift in a meaningless void, but active participants in a divinely ordered cosmos. 2. True happiness, eudaimonia, comes from aligning oneself with this order through virtue. When our actions are consistent with universal reason and our own rational nature, we achieve inner harmony and fulfillment. Virtue is simply living rationally. 3. Tranquility is found in accepting what is beyond one's control. This beautifully connects back to the dichotomy of control. If the universe is rational and purposeful, then everything that happens, even if undesirable from a personal perspective, is part of a larger, intelligent design. Our role is to accept what fate brings, not with resignation, but with understanding, and to react to it virtuously. The cultivation of reason, therefore, is our highest human faculty, our primary task. It is through reason that we can distinguish good from bad, control our judgments, and live virtuously. It allows us to understand our interconnectedness with other rational beings, our duty to the community, and our place in the vast, flowing river of existence. Examples of living according to nature include accepting the cycle of life and death as a natural process, not as a catastrophic event to be railed against, but as an integral part of the cosmic flow. Marcus frequently meditated on his own mortality and the ephemeral nature of all things, not to induce despair, but to embrace reality and appreciate the present. Performing one's duties to the community, not out of grudging obligation, but out of a rational understanding that we are social beings, parts of a larger whole, and our well-being is intertwined with the well-being of others. This is why justice is so crucial, overcoming irrational fears or desires through reasoned analysis. If something truly threatens our virtue, then it's worth addressing. If it's merely an external inconvenience, then reason tells us to accept it calmly. Marcus Aurelius often writes about this, reminding himself, "Everything harmonizes with me that is harmonious to thee, O universe. Nothing for me is too early nor too late, which is in due time for thee." He saw himself as a citizen of the cosmos, accepting his role and his fate as part of a grand, rational whole. Now for another important counterargument. Is living according to nature a clear enough guide for moral action in complex situations? The phrase itself can feel vague. If nature includes everything, how do we distinguish between what is natural in a morally good sense and what is merely natural in an amoral, descriptive sense, e.g., natural disasters, animalistic instincts? Does it offer sufficient guidance when faced with difficult ethical dilemmas that don't have obvious natural answers? This is a valid point. The Stoics would respond by reiterating that living according to nature is not a simplistic rulebook, but a guiding principle that requires constant application of wisdom, one of our cardinal virtues. It does not mean reverting to primitive instincts. Quite the opposite, it means acting according to our rational nature, which distinguishes us from animals. It means using our reason to understand the logos, to discern what truly aligns with universal order and human flourishing. In complex situations, living according to nature compels us to deliberate, to analyze, to weigh consequences, and to act in a way that is consistent with our virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, temperance, and our duty to humanity. It's an active process of ethical inquiry and moral development, not a passive acceptance of whatever happens. It encourages ethical deliberation, a deep consideration of what promotes the greatest good for the greater whole, rather than automatic responses. For instance, when faced with a moral dilemma, a Stoic would ask, what is the most rational choice here? What action upholds justice? What requires courage? What demonstrates temperance? This ongoing philosophical reflection and the cultivation of practical wisdom are essential. This Stoic concept stands in stark contrast to certain aspects of Epicureanism once more. While Epicureans often advocated for withdrawal from public life and avoiding political turmoil to secure individual tranquility, the Stoics saw engagement with the world as a duty, a way to live according to our social, rational nature. They found tranquility not in avoidance but in virtuous action and acceptance within the cosmic city. In the modern world, the idea of living according to nature might seem esoteric, but its essence resonates in fields like environmental ethics, recognizing our place within the natural world, understanding our interconnectedness with ecosystems, and acting responsibly. It underpins the idea of universal human rights deriving from our shared rational nature. It also guides us towards accepting the natural cycles of life, decay, and renewal, fostering a sense of peace even in the face of inevitable change and loss. So as we draw this segment to a close, we can see how the dichotomy of control, the four cardinal virtues, and the principle of living according to nature form a powerful, integrated philosophical system. Marcus Aurelius didn't just passively receive these ideas. He wrestled with them, applied them daily, and through his meditations, provided us with an intimate glimpse into the mind of a philosopher-king striving to live a virtuous life amidst chaos. He reminds us that true freedom and tranquility lie not in controlling the external world, but in mastering our internal one, aligning our reason with the grand, rational order of the cosmos. In our next segment, we'll explore how Marcus applied these tenets to specific challenges of his life, diving into his reflections on adversity, duty, and mortality. Join us then. In our last segment, we began to uncover the historical tapestry woven around Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, and the profound wisdom contained within his meditations. We saw how this extraordinary text, never intended for publication, serves as a private crucible for an emperor grappling with the immense burdens of leadership and the fragility of human existence. Now we delve deeper, moving beyond the context to the very heart of Aurelius's philosophy, the actionable, day-to-day practices and mental exercises he employed for self-mastery. This is where Marcus truly shines as a guide for living, offering not just abstract ideas but practical wisdom, a toolkit for navigating the tumultuous waters of inner and outer life. Marcus Aurelius's techniques for self-mastery are deeply rooted in the broader Stoic tradition, but he refined and personalized them through constant application. He wasn't merely a scholar of Stoicism. He was a practitioner, a lifelong student of himself, relentlessly testing these principles against the unforgiving realities of his emperorship. The Meditations itself is a testament to this practice, a journal, a series of notes to himself, a continuous conversation with his inner sage. It's a window into the mind of a man striving to live virtuously, to be resilient in the face of adversity, and to maintain an unshakable inner peace amidst the chaos of empire, plague, and war. At the core of his approach lies a fundamental Stoic argument The mind is a fortress against external adversity. This isn't a call to isolation, but an assertion of inner sovereignty. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength, he famously wrote. This conviction empowers us to understand that while we cannot control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. This isn't just a comforting thought, it's the foundation for all his techniques. The second key argument follows naturally. Perception is key to inner peace. Our emotional state, our suffering, is often not caused by events themselves, but by our judgments and interpretations of those events. As Epictetus, one of Marcus's intellectual forefathers, taught, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about things. This insight unlocks the door to cognitive reframing, a powerful tool for emotional regulation. And finally, Marcus insisted that constant self-examination is necessary for moral progress. The Meditations is, in essence, an ongoing record of this rigorous self-scrutiny, a daily audit of his thoughts, actions, and reactions. Let's begin with one of the most immediate and challenging aspects of self-mastery, emotional regulation, particularly the handling of anger, grief, fear, and desire. Marcus Aurelius understood anger intimately. He was surrounded by courtiers, advisors, and subordinates who, by turns, were incompetent, conniving, or simply irritating. Imagine the sheer frustration of leading an empire, trying to make critical decisions while navigating the petty squabbles and self-interest of those around you. Yet Marcus consistently advised himself on how to manage this potent emotion. He repeatedly reminds himself, and by extension us, that others' actions stem from their own ignorance or mistaken beliefs, not necessarily a malicious intent to harm us personally. When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own faults. Then you will forget your anger. He writes in Book X, this is a profound exercise in empathy and humility, a cognitive reframing that shifts the focus from external blame to internal self-correction. It's not about excusing bad behavior, but about understanding that your anger doesn't change their behavior, it only harms you. His technique is to depersonalize the offense and understand its root, often acknowledging the shared human condition of error. This mirrors modern cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, techniques, which teach individuals to identify and challenge unhelpful thought patterns that lead to negative emotional responses. Beyond anger, Marcus also grappled with fear and desire. His approach was to apply the dichotomy of control, a core Stoic doctrine. Fear often stems from a concern for outcomes beyond our control. What if I fail? What if I lose my loved ones? What if the empire falls? Desire, similarly, pulls us towards external things we don't possess. Marcus's remedy was simple, yet profoundly difficult in practice. Focus relentlessly on what is within your control, your judgments, your impulses, your actions. External things like wealth, reputation, health, or even the lives of others are indifferent, they can be taken away. Only your virtue, your character, your inner state is truly yours. By consistently reminding himself of this, Marcus sought to detach his emotional well-being from the capricious whims of fate, thereby diminishing the power of fear and excessive desire. This leads us directly into the technique of cognitive reframing or changing perception. Marcus believed that our perceptions color our reality. If we perceive an event as a disaster, we will suffer. If we perceive it as a challenge or an opportunity for virtue, our experience transforms. He would often ask himself, is this situation truly an evil, or merely something that seems evil because of my judgment? This introspective questioning is a powerful tool. He would consider the temporary nature of all things, the insignificance of many daily irritations in the grand scheme of the cosmos. For example, when faced with an unpleasant task or person, he might reframe it as an opportunity to practice patience, kindness, or diligence, virtues that are always within his power to exercise. This proactive mental work is not about denial. It's about actively choosing a more beneficial interpretation, thereby reclaiming control over one's emotional landscape. Central to Marcus's self-mastery, and indeed to the very existence of the Meditations, is the practice of journaling and self-reflection. His book is precisely that, a personal journal. It's a dialogue with himself, a place where he could wrestle with difficult ideas, remind himself of Stoic principles, and critique his own performance. He wasn't writing for an audience. He was writing to cultivate his character, to hold himself accountable to his own highest ideals. This daily ritual of self-examination served several purposes. It reinforced his philosophical studies, helped him clarify his thoughts and values, and acted as a moral compass, guiding him back to the path of virtue whenever he strayed. Through journaling, he could analyze his anger, unpack his fears, and scrutinize his desires, applying the Stoic lens to his raw, lived experience. This practice finds strong echoes in contemporary psychology, where journaling is widely recognized as a therapeutic tool for processing emotions, reducing stress, and fostering self-awareness. From gratitude journals to mood diaries, the act of putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard remains a powerful way to externalize internal turmoil and gain perspective, much as Marcus did 2 millennia ago. Among the most distinctive Stoic practices embraced by Marcus is negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. This is not morbid dwelling on disaster, but a disciplined mental exercise where one deliberately contemplates the potential loss of things one values. Wealth, health, loved ones, social status, even life itself. The purpose is multifaceted. Firstly, it diminishes the shock if these misfortunes were actually to occur, preparing the mind for adversity. Rehearse them in your mind, Seneca advised: exile, torture, war, shipwreck. If you've already mentally rehearsed losing your fortune, the actual loss might still be painful, but it won't be utterly devastating. Secondly, it fosters a profound appreciation for what one currently possesses. By imagining life without your health, you appreciate your current well-being. By contemplating the loss of a loved one, you cherish their presence all the more. This isn't about dread, it's about gratitude. Marcus frequently reminded himself of the brevity of life, not to induce despair, but to motivate action and combat procrastination. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think, he wrote. This stark reminder is designed to strip away trivial concerns and focus on what truly matters, urging us to live fully and virtuously in the present moment, as time is a finite and precious resource. This technique aligns surprisingly with modern psychological concepts like exposure therapy, where individuals gradually confront their fears in a controlled environment to reduce anxiety, or even certain existentialist ideas that emphasize embracing discomfort and the stark realities of existence to live more authentically. Another powerful technique Marcus employed for self-mastery is the view from above, or cosmic perspective. This involves mentally stepping back and viewing oneself, one's problems, and the entire human drama from an immense cosmic vantage point. Imagine floating above the earth, looking down at the sprawling cities, the vast oceans, the tiny ant-like movements of humanity. From this perspective, our personal irritations, our petty grievances, our daily struggles often shrink into insignificance. Marcus would often ask himself, think of the sweep of eternity, the vastness of human life. What is this pain, this worry, this triumph in the face of all that? He wrote. Look down from above on the countless herds of men and their countless ceremonies, and the voyages in storm and calm, and the differences of those who are coming into being, and those who are living together, and those who are passing away. This exercise serves to diminish the importance of trivial irritations, to foster humility, and to remind us of our interconnectedness within the grand scheme of the universe. It helps put things into perspective, encouraging a sense of calm detachment and equanimity. It's a philosophical equivalent of zooming out on a map, suddenly realizing how small your immediate surroundings are in the context of the larger landscape. This practice resonates with modern mindfulness meditation, which often encourages a spacious awareness that encompasses thoughts and feelings without getting entangled in them, and can even evoke a sense of existential awe at the universe's vastness. Mindfulness, though not termed as such in ancient Stoicism, is an inherent aspect of Marcus's practical philosophy. He consistently urged himself to attend to what is happening now. Never let the future disturb you, he advised. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. This focus on the present moment, on observing one's thoughts and actions without judgment, is a cornerstone of his discipline. He trained himself to be fully present in his duties, to listen actively, to perceive clearly, and to act deliberately. This practice combats the common human tendency to either dwell on the past or anxiously project into the future, both of which pull us away from the only moment we truly inhabit. The present, by grounding himself in the now, Marcus sought to minimize the internal noise and distractions that prevent effective action and clear judgment. This proactive engagement with the present is remarkably similar to contemporary secular mindfulness practices, which emphasize non-judgmental awareness of the breath, bodily sensations, thoughts, and emotions as they arise. The cumulative effect of these techniques is the construction of what Marcus called the inner citadel, the mind as a fortress. This isn't a retreat from the world, but a fortification of one's inner self, rendering it impermeable to external shocks. Withdraw into yourself, he wrote. The rational governing principle has this nature. It is content with itself when it acts rightly and thereby secures tranquility. This inner citadel is built upon reason, virtue, and an understanding of what is truly within one's control. It allows an individual to maintain composure and integrity even when surrounded by chaos, hardship, and loss. And Marcus knew profound loss. He lost numerous children, including his twin sons and his beloved wife, Faustina. Historical accounts indicate these were deeply painful experiences. Yet his philosophy guided him to confront these tragedies with a remarkable, though not unfeeling, equanimity. He didn't deny the pain of grief, but he applied his techniques, acknowledging that these were external events beyond his control, focusing on the virtues of acceptance and resilience, and remembering the transient nature of all things, including life itself. He would likely have recalled Epictetus's teaching, "When you kiss your child, you should say to yourself, it's possible that this child will die tomorrow. This isn't heartlessness. It's a profound recognition of impermanence, intended to foster a deeper appreciation for the time one has, and to cultivate acceptance when the inevitable occurs." His ability to lead an empire effectively while enduring such personal heartbreak stands as a testament to the power of these Stoic practices. Now it's crucial to acknowledge some of the potential counterarguments and criticisms leveled against these Stoic approaches to self-mastery. One significant concern is whether constant introspection, this rigorous self-examination Marcus so heavily relied upon, can lead to excessive self-criticism or even anxiety. If one is constantly auditing one's thoughts and actions, is there a risk of becoming overly self-conscious, of falling into a neurotic rumination spiral? Modern psychology often distinguishes between healthy self-reflection and unproductive rumination, where one gets stuck in repetitive negative thought patterns. The Stoic answer, as understood through Marcus, would likely be that introspection is meant to be objective and rational, not emotionally charged or self-flagellating. The goal is to identify deviations from virtue and reason, not to condemn oneself for human fallibility. It's an ongoing process of course correction, akin to a sailor constantly checking their bearing. The objective is improvement, not perfection, and certainly not self-punishment. If introspection leads to anxiety, the Stoics would argue that the individual is likely misapplying the technique, perhaps indulging in judgments about their own perceived failures rather than simply observing them and seeking a rational path forward. They would redirect the focus from self-judgment to discerning what is truly within one's control, the next virtuous choice. The distinction is subtle but vital. It's not about dwelling on past mistakes with guilt, but learning from them for future action. A second counterargument concerns the mind as a fortress analogy. Does this pursuit of an unshakable inner citadel, this focus on emotional detachment from external events, isolate one from genuine human connection and the richness of shared experience? If one is constantly reminding oneself of the impermanence of loved ones and the indifference of external goods, does it lead to a coldness, a lack of deep empathy or engagement? Again, a careful reading of Marcus suggests otherwise. The Stoic fortress is not a prison that cuts one off from the world, but a stable foundation from which one can better engage with the world. Marcus repeatedly emphasized our interconnectedness, our social duty, oikeiosis, and the importance of acting justly and kindly towards others. "What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bee," he famously wrote, illustrating this profound sense of universal kinship. The point of cultivating inner tranquility is not to become indifferent to human suffering, but to prevent one's own emotional turmoil from clouding judgment and hindering effective, compassionate action. A Stoic sage would not be a stone-hearted recluse, but a calm, rational, and effective agent of good in the world, precisely because they are not swayed by personal desires or fears. Their detachment is from the outcome of their actions, not from the duty to act virtuously for the benefit of all. Rather than isolating, it allows for a more selfless and consistent form of connection, free from the entanglements of attachment or expectation. Finally, we must address whether Stoicism and Marcus's techniques adequately address the psychological impact of profound loss. While acknowledging the value of equanimity, some might argue that Stoicism's emphasis on acceptance and detachment risks minimizing the very real, often overwhelming, experience of grief. Can the mind truly be a fortress against the devastation of losing a child, a spouse, or one's entire way of life? Marcus Aurelius's own experiences suggest that Stoicism doesn't negate the pain, but provides a framework for processing it. It's not about emotional suppression in the modern psychological sense, but about acknowledging the reality of the loss while reframing one's relationship to it. The Stoics didn't say, "Don't feel sad." They said, "Don't add to your sadness by clinging to what is gone, by railing against fate, or by believing that what has happened is inherently bad rather than simply an event." This nuanced approach recognizes that pain is a natural human response, but suffering often comes from resistance to what is beyond our control. Modern grief counseling, while differing in many aspects, often converges on the importance of acceptance and finding meaning in loss, which resonates with the Stoic emphasis on moving forward with virtue. Marcus's ability to continue his duties, to lead with courage and wisdom despite devastating personal losses, doesn't imply a lack of feeling, but a profound strength of character cultivated through these very practices. He learned to differentiate between the natural pangs of grief and the additional suffering imposed by unexamined judgments and resistance to reality. In conclusion, the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius offers far more than just philosophical ponderings. It provides a profound and remarkably enduring toolkit for self-mastery. His techniques of emotional regulation, cognitive reframing, journaling, negative visualization, and cultivating a cosmic perspective are not mere intellectual exercises. They are battle-tested strategies for developing an inner resilience, an unshakable inner citadel that can withstand the fiercest storms of life. While acknowledging potential pitfalls like excessive introspection or emotional isolation, a deeper understanding of Stoicism reveals that these practices are ultimately designed to make us more effective, more compassionate, and more present individuals, capable of navigating our complex world with grace and integrity. The journey of self-mastery, as Marcus showed us, is a lifelong endeavor, a continuous conversation with oneself, always striving to align our inner world with the universal reason and virtue that he believed underpinned all existence. His personal notes, these humble meditations, remain an open invitation to join him on that transformative path. We've spent considerable time exploring Marcus Aurelius's profound insights into individual self-mastery, the cultivation of an inner citadel impervious to external shocks. But to truly grasp the breadth and depth of his philosophy, we must zoom out, far beyond the confines of the individual soul, to understand his vision of humanity's place within the grand tapestry of the universe itself. This is where Marcus's philosophy truly blossoms, transforming personal ethics into a universal ethic, a call to duty and community that extends to all rational beings. At the heart of this expansive vision lies the concept of the cosmic city, or cosmopolis. This wasn't Marcus's original idea. It emerged much earlier with Zeno of Citium, the very founder of Stoicism, around the turn of the 3rd century BCE. Zeno envisioned a world where all rational beings, regardless of their nationality, social status, or even species, for the Stoics sometimes extended rationality to animals in certain contexts, belonged to a single, universal community governed by the same divine reason, the same logos that permeated the cosmos. Imagine a city not built of brick and mortar, but of shared reason, a metropolis whose boundaries are the very limits of the universe. Marcus Aurelius, as a devoted student of Stoicism, embraced this idea wholeheartedly. For him, it wasn't merely a philosophical abstraction, it was the bedrock upon which his entire understanding of human life, duty, and justice was built. He often wrote in his meditations, "My nature is rational and civic, and my city and country, so far as I am an Antonine, is Rome. But so far as I am a man, it is the world." This single sentence encapsulates the dual allegiance he felt. To the earthly empire he governed and to the boundless realm of humanity, united by shared reason. This was a radical idea in the ancient world, often characterized by tribalism, xenophobia, and strict hierarchies. To assert a universal kinship, a common citizenship with all people, was to challenge deeply ingrained social norms. The immediate implication of the cosmopolis for Marcus was a profound sense of duty, not just to oneself or to one's immediate family or even to one's nation, but to the entire human race. Humans, he argued, are not solitary creatures, destined for isolated existence. Rather, we are inherently social beings, wired for cooperation, interdependence, and mutual aid. Our very rationality, the faculty that defines us, compels us towards community. He observed, we are made for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of the upper and lower teeth. To act against one another, then, is contrary to nature. This isn't just a quaint observation, it's a foundational argument. Our individual lives, he believed, gain their deepest meaning and purpose through service to the whole, through contributing to the flourishing of this vast cosmic city. This perspective naturally led Marcus to emphasize justice and benevolence as cardinal virtues. Justice, for him, was not merely about upholding Roman law, but about ensuring fair treatment for all members of the cosmic community. Benevolence wasn't a selective act of kindness to friends, but an expansive attitude of goodwill towards all rational beings, even those who might have wronged him. He famously grappled with forgiving wrongdoers, often reminding himself that they too are fellow rational beings, albeit ones who have erred. He would reflect that human beings exist for the sake of one another, teach them or bear with them. This isn't a passive acceptance, but an active engagement driven by the understanding of shared humanity. When he faced plots against him, or the frustrations of dealing with difficult subordinates, he would constantly remind himself of this shared rational nature, seeking to understand rather than immediately condemn. This was a direct application of his philosophy to the intensely personal and often perilous world of imperial politics. The imperative to serve the common good, therefore, transcended national boundaries. While Marcus was the emperor of Rome, his philosophical lens was far wider. He sought the welfare of his subjects, yes, but not just Romans. The diverse peoples of his vast empire, Gauls, Egyptians, Greeks, Syrians, were all, in his view, part of this larger human family, deserving of just governance and humane treatment. His administrative decisions often reflected this, prioritizing public works that benefited all, striving for fairness in taxation, and attempting to maintain peace and order across a multi-ethnic domain. This resonates strongly with the ideals of Roman civic virtue, championed by figures like Cicero, who stressed the importance of pietas duty to gods, family, and country, and the pursuit of public service for the benefit of all citizens. Marcus, however, elevated this Roman ideal to a universal scale. One could draw interesting parallels here with Immanuel Kant's later ethical framework, particularly his concept of the categorical imperative and universalizability. For Kant, a moral action is one whose maxim could be willed to become a universal law, binding on all rational beings. While the underlying metaphysics differ, Kant's focus on autonomous reason versus the Stoic logos, the outward expression of duty, universally applied and grounded in rationality, shares a remarkable kinship. Both Marcus and Kant compel us to ask, what duties do I owe, not just to my people, but to all people, precisely because they are rational agents? The Stoic answer is clear. The duty to cooperate, to be just, to be benevolent, and to contribute to the harmony of the cosmopolis. Now, Marcus's profound insights extend even further, embracing a deep contemplation of death, transience, and the cyclical nature of existence. For him, an understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos would be incomplete without a fearless gaze into our own mortality. Constantly reflect how quickly all things are dissolved and swept away, those that are now and those that are to come. This isn't a morbid obsession, but a practice designed to cultivate wisdom, gratitude, and a profound appreciation for life itself. By acknowledging the fleeting nature of all things, we are paradoxically freed to live more fully in the present, to cherish each moment, and to focus on what truly matters, our character and our duty. He saw death not as an end, but as a natural and inevitable part of the cosmic order, as essential to the cycle of the universe as birth and growth. Imagine a vast, eternal river, constantly flowing. Individual drops of water enter, flow for a while, and then merge back into the larger current, only for new drops to emerge. Our lives, he suggested, are like these drops, distinct for a time, yet ultimately part of the ceaseless flow of existence. He frequently reflected on the continuous cycles of nature, the falling leaves that nourish the soil for new growth, the decay of one organism fueling the life of another, the endless ebb and flow of seasons. These natural processes served as a constant reminder that death is not an anomaly, but an integral, beautiful, and necessary component of the grand cosmic dance. Look at the continually changing state of the universe, he advised, and reflect that everything that exists at present will quickly change and be dissolved and pass away, and that new things will quickly come into existence and then again pass away. This contemplation, far from inducing despair, was meant to instill a sense of serene acceptance. Death for Marcus was simply a change, a transformation, a return of our constituent elements to the universal logos. It was an indifferent thing, neither good nor bad, and therefore not something to be feared. The only thing to fear, he might argue, is failing to live virtuously while we are still alive. This perspective echoes strikingly with Buddhist concepts of interconnectedness and impermanence, anicca. In Buddhist philosophy, the recognition that all phenomena are transient and interconnected is central to liberation from suffering. While the underlying metaphysical frameworks differ, both traditions encourage a detached observation of life's flux, fostering a profound acceptance of change, including the ultimate change of death. Both see existence as a dynamic process, not a static state, where every moment is fleeting and yet intrinsically linked to all others. Of course, these profound ideas aren't without their challenges, and it's important to engage with the counterarguments that might arise. One significant critique leveled against an extreme focus on duty and cosmic interconnectedness is, can it lead to a suppression of individual desires and passions? Does it demand too much, perhaps sacrificing personal happiness and fulfillment on the altar of a universal good? Indeed, Stoicism, with its emphasis on aligning one's will with the rational order of the cosmos and subordinating personal desires to virtue, can sometimes appear austere, even emotionally repressive. Marcus certainly advocated for controlling passions like anger, grief, and pleasure when they interfered with rational judgment and virtuous action. He believed that unchecked emotions were disturbances that hindered our duty to ourselves and the larger community. However, it's crucial to understand that Stoicism doesn't demand the elimination of all emotions, but rather their rational management. The Stoics, after all, developed the concept of oikeiosis, often translated as appropriation or affinity, which describes how our natural affections gradually extend outward. We start with love for ourselves, then extend it to our family, friends, neighbors, fellow citizens, and ultimately all of humanity. This process isn't about denying our individual desires, but about aligning them with a higher, more expansive good. Our individual flourishing, for Marcus, wasn't separate from the flourishing of the whole, but intrinsically linked to it. When we act virtuously, when we fulfill our duty, we are not sacrificing ourself. We are fulfilling our truest self. Another counterargument might question whether the cosmic perspective risks nihilism by diminishing individual struggles. If our lives are but fleeting moments in an infinite cosmos, if our personal triumphs and tragedies are utterly insignificant on a cosmic scale, what's the point? Doesn't this perspective make our individual efforts seem meaningless? Marcus wrestled with this very question, and his answer was a resounding no. For him, the vastness of the cosmos, far from diminishing our struggles, imbues them with a unique significance. We are not just tiny specks, we are conscious, rational fragments of the divine logos, capable of understanding and participating in this grand order. Our individual struggles, when met with virtue, contribute to the harmony of the whole. Our tiny actions, when guided by reason and duty, ripple outwards, affecting the entire web of existence. The cosmic perspective, rather than inspiring nihilism, should inspire awe, humility, and a profound sense of purpose. It reminds us that while we are small, we are also part of something infinitely greater, and our capacity for reason and virtue gives us a unique and profound role within it. It's not that our individual life doesn't matter, but that its mattering is intrinsically tied to its relationship with the whole. A third, and perhaps most potent, counterargument, especially from a modern perspective, is this. Does an exclusive focus on individual virtuous action and the cosmic city sufficiently address systemic injustices beyond individual wrongdoing? Marcus was an emperor, a man of immense power. While he emphasized individual duty and forgiveness, does Stoicism, in general, adequately account for the need for structural, political, and social change to address oppression, inequality, and institutionalized injustice? This is a complex question. While Stoicism largely focuses on what is within our control, our judgments, desires, and actions, it doesn't inherently preclude political action. Indeed, many Stoics like Seneca, Cato the Younger, and of course Marcus himself, were deeply involved in politics. Marcus's governance, as noted, involved tangible efforts to improve the lives of his subjects through public works, legal reforms, and striving for fairness. His philosophy, therefore, informed his practical leadership. However, the Stoic emphasis is on internal transformation first. The idea is that a virtuous ruler or citizen, guided by reason and cosmic duty, would naturally strive for a just society. It places the onus primarily on the individual's ethical development as the prerequisite for a just world, rather than prescribing specific political systems or revolutionary actions. It might be argued that this approach could be slow or insufficient to dismantle entrenched systems of power and privilege. While Marcus could alleviate suffering through his decrees, the Stoic framework itself doesn't offer a comprehensive theory of social justice beyond the principles of universal reason and cooperation. This is where cross-references to modern political philosophy, particularly theories concerning distributive justice or the critique of power structures, might highlight perceived gaps. Yet Marcus would likely contend that systemic injustice fundamentally stems from individual vices, greed, ambition, irrationality, and therefore, the primary battle must be fought within the individual soul. Let's take a moment to reflect on the Socratic roots of this emphasis on the inner life. Socrates, through his relentless questioning, compelled his fellow Athenians to focus on the care of the soul, epimelia hudou, as the highest human endeavor. For him, true wisdom and happiness lay not in external goods or social status, but in cultivating one's moral character and living an examined life. The Stoics, including Marcus, inherited this Socratic imperative. They believed that perfecting one's inner self, aligning one's reason with the logos, was not a selfish pursuit, but the essential prerequisite for fulfilling one's duty to the community and the cosmos. How could one effectively serve humanity if one's own soul was in turmoil, driven by irrational passions, or clouded by ignorance? The care of the soul, therefore, was the foundation upon which the entire edifice of cosmic citizenship was built. To illustrate these ideas, let's consider some historical anecdotes. The Romans, throughout their history, were renowned for their civic virtue. From the early republics, legendary figures like Cincinnatus, who left his plow to serve as dictator in a time of crisis and then returned to his farm, to the vast public works that span the empire, aqueducts, roads, forums, their society showcased a strong commitment to the res publica, the public thing. Marcus Aurelius, in his role as emperor, embodied this on a grand scale. While facing barbarian invasions and a devastating plague, he diligently worked to maintain the welfare of his subjects, even selling off imperial treasures to fund military efforts and public services, rather than burdening the populace with excessive taxes. He saw this as his clear duty to the cosmic city. Another powerful illustration comes from the many accounts of Stoics facing death with remarkable calm and acceptance. Cato the Younger, a staunch Republican and Stoic, famously took his own life rather than live under Caesar's tyranny, doing so with meticulous composure, reading Plato's Phaedo on the immortality of the soul beforehand. Seneca, forced to commit suicide by Nero, met his end with philosophical discourse and a tranquil farewell to his loved ones. These aren't acts of despair, but demonstrations of the Stoic ideal. To accept what is beyond one's control, including death, with an inner serenity born of virtue and an understanding of the cosmic order. For Marcus, contemplating these examples and the natural cycles of decay and renewal allowed him to frame his own mortality, not as a terrifying void, but as an inevitable and natural transition within the grand scheme of things. In our modern world, these ancient Stoic insights into duty, community, and the cosmos find renewed resonance in several areas. Consider modern environmental ethics. As we confront climate change and ecological crises, the idea of humanity's interconnectedness, not just with other humans but with the entire natural world, becomes profoundly relevant. The Stoic concept of the oikos, the shared home, extends beyond human society to encompass the ecosystem. Marcus's contemplation of nature's cycles and our place within them offers a powerful philosophical grounding for environmental stewardship, emphasizing our duty to preserve and protect our planet as part of the larger cosmic order. We are not separate from nature but an integral part of it, and our well-being is intrinsically linked to its health. Similarly, the notion of the cosmopolis speaks directly to contemporary discussions about global citizenship, human rights, and international cooperation. In an increasingly globalized and interconnected world, where actions in one corner of the globe ripple across continents, the idea that we owe a duty to all humanity, transcending national borders, is more vital than ever. The universal principles of justice and benevolence that Marcus championed are foundational to the very concept of universal human rights and the pursuit of a just global society. His philosophy challenges us to move beyond narrow self-interest or nationalistic perspectives and embrace a broader, more inclusive vision of our shared humanity. Finally, in political philosophy, Marcus Aurelius stands as a perennial example of leadership guided by duty and virtue. His reflections offer profound insights into the challenges of governance, the imperative to rule for the common good, and the personal sacrifices required of those in power. His emphasis on justice, fairness, and the welfare of all subjects, not just a privileged few, remains a powerful ideal for leaders today, reminding us that true authority stems from moral character and a commitment to service, rather than personal gain or power for its own sake. In conclusion, Marcus Aurelius's philosophy extends far beyond individual self-improvement. It presents a comprehensive worldview where humanity is inextricably linked to the cosmos, bound by universal reason and a shared destiny. His vision of the cosmic city calls us to recognize our inherent social nature, to embrace our duties to all rational beings, and to strive for justice and benevolence on a universal scale. Furthermore, by courageously contemplating death and transience, he offers us a path to peace and a richer appreciation for the fleeting beauty of life, framing our mortality as a natural and inevitable part of the grand cosmic order. His words invite us to live with purpose, to serve with integrity, and to accept our place within the magnificent unfolding drama of the universe. We've journeyed through the life and philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, explored the practical wisdom encapsulated in his meditations, and understood how an emperor, amidst the crushing weight of duty and personal sorrow, sought solace and strength in Stoic principles. But as we reach the conclusion of our exploration, it's crucial to ask, what is the enduring legacy of Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism in our modern world? How does his ancient wisdom speak to us across millennia, and what are the legitimate criticisms that need to be addressed? The legacy of Marcus Aurelius is, in many ways, inextricable from the fate of Stoicism itself. His personal reflections, never intended for publication, became one of the most beloved and accessible texts of ancient philosophy. For centuries, the Meditations lay largely dormant, a treasure awaiting rediscovery. This rediscovery truly began to gain momentum during the Renaissance, a period marked by a fervent return to classical texts and a renewed interest in human potential and ethics. Scholars and thinkers, disillusioned with certain aspects of medieval scholasticism, found in Aurelius a profound yet practical guide to self-governance and moral excellence. Fast forward to the Enlightenment, and we see the Meditations influencing figures who championed reason, individual liberty, and moral autonomy. Think of someone like Michel de Montaigne, the great French essayist who, despite his skepticism and often Epicurean leanings, held a deep respect for Stoic wisdom. Montaigne wrestled with Stoic ideals throughout his essays, often admiring their strength and discipline even as he explored human fallibility and the limits of reason. His work demonstrates how Stoicism, even when gently challenged, provided a powerful framework for self-examination. Another prominent example is Frederick the Great of Prussia, often hailed as an enlightened despot and a philosopher-king in his own right. Frederick explicitly drew inspiration from Marcus Aurelius, seeing in him a model for leadership rooted in duty, reason, and an unwavering commitment to the welfare of his people. He even carried a copy of the Meditations with him, seeking guidance and solace amidst the rigors of governance and warfare. This thread of influence extends into military thinking, where the Stoic emphasis on discipline, resilience, rational decision-making under pressure, and the acceptance of what cannot be changed has resonated deeply with leaders throughout history. From battlefield commanders to those leading complex organizations, the lessons of inner fortitude and strategic calm, so powerfully articulated by Aurelius, have proven invaluable. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism have experienced a remarkable resurgence in popularity. Why now? Perhaps it's because our modern world, with its dizzying pace, information overload, and constant anxieties, mirrors the turbulent times of the Antonine Plague and barbarian invasions in some existential way. People are searching for anchors, for frameworks that offer meaning, resilience, and a sense of control in an increasingly uncontrollable environment. The Meditations have found new life not just in academic philosophy, but in self-help literature, in Silicon Valley boardrooms, and among everyday individuals seeking to navigate personal and professional challenges. This widespread embrace speaks volumes about the timeless appeal of his message. However, with popularity often comes simplification, and with simplification, misinterpretation. Stoicism, in particular, has been plagued by several common misunderstandings that paint it in a rather unflattering light. One of the most frequent critiques is that Stoicism advocates for emotional repression, leading to a cold, dispassionate, even robotic existence. The very word Stoic in common parlance suggests someone who suppresses all feelings, showing no joy, no sorrow, no anger. This is perhaps the most enduring and damaging mischaracterization. To understand why it's wrong, we must go back to the source. Stoicism does not teach the absence of emotion. Humans are emotional beings, that is part of our nature. What Stoicism teaches is the management and rational evaluation of emotions, particularly those destructive, overwhelming passions that cloud judgment and lead to irrational actions. Consider the Stoic concept of apatheia, often translated as apathy, but this is not apathy in the modern sense of indifference or lack of care. For the Stoics, apatheia meant freedom from pathos, from suffering or unhealthy passions. It referred to a state where one is not enslaved by irrational desires, fears, or anxieties, but rather guided by reason. A Stoic sage feels pain, grief, joy, and love. They are not immune. But they process these emotions through the lens of reason, questioning whether their judgments about events are rational and whether their emotional responses are constructive. Marcus Aurelius himself, in the Meditations, repeatedly reflects on managing his anger, fear, and sorrow over the death of loved ones. He doesn't deny these feelings. He confronts them, analyzes them, and works to bring them into alignment with reason and virtue. He writes, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This isn't about crushing emotions, but gaining mastery over one's internal world. Modern psychology, particularly in areas like emotional intelligence and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, echoes this Stoic wisdom, emphasizing the importance of identifying, understanding, and skillfully managing one's emotional landscape rather than suppressing it entirely. Another common critique is that Stoicism leads to fatalism and passivity, encouraging individuals to simply accept whatever happens without striving for change. This idea of amor fati, love of fate, is often misconstrued as a surrender to destiny. However, for the Stoics, amor fati is not a passive resignation. It is an active, willing acceptance of reality, particularly those aspects beyond our control, as a prerequisite for effective action within our sphere of influence. It's about not wasting energy fighting battles that cannot be won, but instead channeling that energy into what can be changed. This brings us to the famous dichotomy of control, a cornerstone of Stoic thought, most articulately presented by Epictetus. He states some things are in our control and others are not. Things in our control are opinion, pursuit, desire, aversion, and in a word, whatever are our own actions. Things not in our control are body, property, reputation, command, and in a word, whatever are not our own actions. The Stoics never suggested that we should sit idly by while injustice or suffering unfolds. On the contrary, they believed in active participation in the world, engaging with our duties to family, community, and humanity. But they emphasized focusing our efforts where they matter most. On our intentions, our judgments, and our actions, rather than on external outcomes that are ultimately subject to chance. A Stoic would not passively accept a corrupt government. They would act virtuously within their capacity to advocate for change, understanding that the outcome of that advocacy is not entirely theirs to control, but the effort and intention certainly are. This is active engagement, not passivity. These nuanced rebuttals bring us to a deeper engagement with some philosophical counterarguments. One of the most potent comes from thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously critiqued Stoicism, along with other ascetic philosophies, for what he perceived as a will to negation, a life-denying impulse. Nietzsche, with his emphasis on the will to power, amor fati as an embrace of suffering, and the celebration of human potential in its rawest form, saw Stoicism's attempt to live according to nature as a profound self-deception. He argued that nature itself is wild, chaotic, amoral, and indifferent, and that the Stoics were trying to impose a rational, ordered, human-centric morality onto it. For Nietzsche, to try and suppress one's passions or rationalize away suffering was to diminish life itself, to choose weakness over strength, and to avoid the necessary struggle that leads to genuine flourishing. He viewed the Stoic sage as a figure who, fearing the chaos of existence, sought refuge in an artificial inner fortress, rather than courageously dancing on the precipice. However, a Stoic rebuttal to Nietzsche would highlight that Stoicism doesn't deny the chaos of existence, it acknowledges it explicitly. The meditations are replete with reminders of life's brevity, its suffering, its arbitrary nature. But Stoicism offers a way to navigate that chaos without being consumed by it. It doesn't aim to escape suffering, but to transform one's relationship with it. Amor fati for a Stoic isn't about merely tolerating fate but loving it, seeing every event, even adversity, as an opportunity to practice virtue. This is not weakness but a profound psychological strength. The will to power for a Stoic might be reinterpreted as the power to govern one's own internal kingdom, to choose one's response, which is arguably the most fundamental power a human can wield. And living according to nature, for the Stoics, didn't mean conforming to biological urges, but living according to human rational nature, which they believed was inherently connected to the rational order of the cosmos. Another related critique emerges from existentialist thought, particularly figures like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus. Existentialism emphasizes radical freedom, individual responsibility for creating meaning in an inherently absurd world, and the anguish of choice. At first glance, Stoicism might seem to clash with this, given its emphasis on a rational cosmic order and living according to nature. However, there's a surprising convergence. Both philosophies place enormous emphasis on individual responsibility and internal freedom. The Stoic concept of proherses, our faculty of moral choice and judgment, resonates strongly with the existentialist idea that existence precedes essence, meaning we are condemned to be free and to define ourselves through our choices. While an existentialist might reject the idea of an inherent cosmic meaning, the Stoics' rigorous self-examination and commitment to creating a virtuous life through conscious choice aligns with the existentialist imperative to live authentically and take responsibility for one's own values. Both schools of thought challenge us to look inward, to acknowledge the limits of external control, and to forge meaning through our actions. Beyond these philosophical debates, more contemporary counterarguments question Stoicism's applicability in certain domains. Firstly, does Stoicism's emphasis on individual virtue sometimes overlook systemic inequalities and privilege? If everyone is simply focused on managing their own reactions and cultivating personal virtue, does it dilute the impetus for collective action and social change against entrenched injustices? This is a serious concern. If one merely accepts the fate of being born into poverty or facing discrimination, without striving to alter those external realities, is Stoicism then a philosophy of quiet resignation to injustice? The Stoic answer would be a resounding no. The Stoics were cosmopolitans, believing in a universal human brotherhood. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminds himself that we are born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids, like the rows of upper and lower teeth. Justice is one of the four cardinal virtues, alongside wisdom, courage, and temperance. A virtuous Stoic is not indifferent to the suffering of others or to social injustice. While they recognize that they cannot control the entire system, they absolutely can control their own efforts to act justly, to advocate for the oppressed, and to contribute to positive change within their sphere of influence. Seneca, himself a powerful figure in Roman politics, often wrote about the duty of the wise person to engage in public life for the good of the community. The dichotomy of control would apply here. One cannot control the systemic outcomes, but one can control one's actions, words, and efforts towards justice. To ignore injustice would be a failure of the virtue of justice itself. Therefore, a properly understood Stoicism compels action, not passivity, in the face of systemic problems, albeit action guided by reason and focused on what is truly within one's power. Secondly, is Stoicism an outdated philosophy for a postmodern, emotionally expressive world? Our contemporary culture often values vulnerability, open emotional expression, and a rejection of rigid systems. Does Stoicism's perceived stiffness or emphasis on reason over raw emotion make it irrelevant? Again, the misinterpretation of emotional suppression rears its head. Modern Stoicism, informed by centuries of reflection, emphasizes emotional literacy and management, not suppression. It encourages understanding the roots of our feelings and choosing wise responses, which aligns perfectly with modern concepts of emotional intelligence and mental well-being. Furthermore, in a world often overwhelmed by information, fragmentation, and a crisis of meaning, Stoicism offers a powerful antidote. It provides a robust, coherent framework for ethical living, a method for grounding oneself amidst chaos, and a means to discern what truly matters. Far from being outdated, its emphasis on inner resilience and distinguishing truth from noise can be seen as profoundly relevant in navigating the complexities and often superficiality of the digital age. Finally, can Stoicism adequately address collective action problems? Many of the most pressing issues facing humanity today, climate change, pandemics, global economic inequalities, require coordinated efforts on a massive scale. If Stoicism primarily focuses on individual virtue and internal serenity, how can it contribute to solving such large-scale collective challenges? While Stoicism is fundamentally a personal philosophy, its principles can form the bedrock for effective collective action. A society composed of individuals who practice self-control, reason, justice, and courage is far more equipped to address complex problems than one driven by fear, short-sightedness, and selfish desires. Imagine a world where leaders apply the dichotomy of control to global issues, focusing on what is within their collective power to change, e.g., policy, innovation, international cooperation, rather than succumbing to despair over what is not. Imagine citizens who act virtuously, prioritize the common good, and maintain resilience in the face of setbacks. Stoicism, by cultivating such individuals, creates the necessary psychological and ethical foundation for robust, sustained, and effective collective action. It encourages individuals to be responsible, contributing members of the global community, applying their virtues to the largest possible sphere. Let's now turn to the profound relevance of Marcus Aurelius's philosophy to contemporary challenges. In a world grappling with anxiety and stress, the Stoic dichotomy of control remains an unparalleled tool. We are constantly bombarded by news of crises, economic uncertainties, and personal setbacks. Much of this generates anxiety because we focus on outcomes outside our control. Stoicism teaches us to draw a clear line: what is up to me and what is not. My effort, my attitude, my character, these are mine. The stock market, other people's opinions, even the weather, these are not. By focusing our energy and concern exclusively on what is within our power, we dramatically reduce the mental burden of worry and cultivate a profound sense of inner peace. This is not escapism, it is strategic mental focus. When faced with a career setback, for instance, a Stoic would acknowledge the disappointment but immediately shift focus to what can be done. Updating skills, networking, applying for new positions, maintaining a positive outlook, and learning from the experience, rather than dwelling on the unfairness of the layoff or the past. The same applies to relationship challenges. While you cannot control another person's feelings or decisions, you can control your own responses, your communication, your self-respect, and your choices moving forward. Consider the pervasive influence of consumerism and social media. These forces often drive us towards external validation and material acquisition as sources of happiness. Stoicism offers a powerful counter-narrative. It emphasizes that true contentment comes from within, from cultivating virtue and living in alignment with reason, rather than from accumulating possessions or seeking external approval. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. This is a radical message in a consumer-driven society. Regarding social media, the Stoic asks, am I seeking likes and comments for genuine connection, or for ephemeral validation that makes me dependent on others' opinions? Am I comparing my curated life to others' curated lives, leading to envy or dissatisfaction? The Stoic focus on inner worth, proherses, helps us filter out the noise, resist the urge for constant external affirmation, and concentrate on our own character development. It encourages mindful engagement rather than reactive consumption, treating platforms as tools for connection and learning, not as arenas for ego display or comparison. It also offers a framework for managing information overload, prompting us to ask, is this necessary? Is this productive? Does this align with my values? Before diving into another endless scroll. Political polarization is another profound challenge of our age. Society often feels fractured, with an us versus them mentality dominating discourse. Here, Stoic cosmopolitanism offers a healing perspective. The Stoics believed in a universal human community, recognizing our shared rationality and common humanity. Marcus Aurelius urges us to remember that we are all parts of a larger whole. While we may disagree vehemently on policies, Stoicism encourages us to approach political discourse with reason, to seek understanding, and to act with justice and temperance, even towards those with whom we disagree. It teaches us to focus on our shared civic duty, to contribute constructively, and to avoid the destructive passions of rage and tribalism, without ever condoning harmful actions or injustices. It's about being effective agents of change where possible, rather than succumbing to despair or self-righteous anger. Perhaps most profoundly, Stoicism addresses the modern search for meaning in a rapidly changing world. In an increasingly secular and complex society, many grapple with existential questions. Stoicism provides a clear, actionable framework for purpose, living a life of virtue, aligning oneself with reason, and contributing to the common good. It grounds us in principles that transcend fleeting trends and external circumstances. It teaches us to find meaning not in what we have or what happens to us, but in how we are and how we respond. The daily practice of Stoicism, through reflection, journaling, and mindful action, becomes a continuous journey of self-improvement and ethical living, providing a profound sense of purpose and direction. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, repeatedly exhorts himself, and by extension us, to waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. This is an active, ongoing quest for meaning. The enduring relevance of Stoicism is also evident in its implicit adoption by various modern disciplines. Positive psychology, for instance, with its focus on character strengths, resilience, gratitude, and cultivating a sense of flourishing, shares significant common ground with Stoic philosophy. Mindfulness movements such as mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, are deeply aligned with the Stoic emphasis on present-moment awareness, non-judgmental observation, and the distinction between events and our judgments about them. Even existential therapy, while coming from a different philosophical lineage, often helps clients find meaning, take responsibility for their choices, and confront the anxieties of existence, all themes present in Stoicism. In leadership development, particularly in high-stakes environments like the military or corporate executive training, Stoic principles of emotional regulation, rational decision-making under pressure, and focusing on what is controllable are frequently integrated, often without explicit attribution. Think about modern resilience training for first responders, healthcare workers, or soldiers. These programs invariably include elements like cognitive restructuring, challenging irrational thoughts, a core Stoic practice, stress inoculation, consciously exposing oneself to manageable stressors to build fortitude, akin to Stoic premeditation of evils, and emotional regulation techniques. These are practical applications of ancient Stoic wisdom. When a soldier is taught to focus on their mission in training rather than the overwhelming chaos of battle, or when a surgeon is trained to maintain calm and focus despite the immense pressure of life or death decisions, they are, in essence, practicing Stoicism. Even the popular self-help industry, for all its commercialization and occasional superficiality, often unknowingly repackages Stoic principles. Advice like focus on what you can control, don't sweat the small stuff, live in the present, practice gratitude, or learn from adversity are direct echoes of Stoic teachings. This pervasive, often unacknowledged, influence is a testament to the fundamental human truths that Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics articulated so eloquently. In conclusion, the legacy of Marcus Aurelius is far more than the historical record of a Roman emperor. It is a living philosophy, continually rediscovered and reinterpreted, offering a powerful, practical framework for living a good life. While legitimate critiques exist, a nuanced understanding reveals that Stoicism, far from being cold, fatalistic, or emotionally repressive, is a philosophy of active engagement, rational emotional management, and profound inner strength. It provides tools for navigating the anxieties of modern life, for finding meaning amidst uncertainty, and for cultivating the virtues necessary to flourish as individuals and contribute constructively to our communities. The meditations, these private reflections of a burdened emperor, remain a lighthouse for anyone seeking guidance through life's storms. Marcus Aurelius invites us not to escape the world, but to engage with it mindfully, courageously, and virtuously. He challenges us to look inward, to claim sovereignty over our minds, and to become the person we aspire to be. His final, whispered wisdom to himself, and now to us, is not a call to philosophical abstraction, but a timeless, urgent plea for us to embody the principles we admire. Live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by. If there are gods but unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will be gone, but will have lived a noble life that will live on in the memories of your loved ones. A philosophy for all times and for the complexities of our own.